the billionaire alternate home aboriginal, and was abashed to acquisition his atramentus, Maid teaching his son. The arena Robert Williams encountered aback, he quietly opened the aperture to the library of his Beverly Hills abode larboard him completely paralyzed. There was Grace, the 35-year-old woman he had assassined to clean his abode aloof 2 months earlier, sitting on the attic abutting to his 8-year-old son, Tyler. But she wasn't cleaning. She was teaching algebraic using colored blocks with an alignment Robert had never apparent before. If you acquire 5 green blocks and you charge to bisect them equally amid 3 friends, what happens? Grace asked with infinite patience, while Tyler manipulated the objects with absolute concentration. "There's 1 block left," exclaimed the boy, beaming. "But I can accord a little piece to anniversary friend." Robert captivated his breath. His son, diagnosed with learning difficulties and costing a affluence in sessions with specialists, was genuinely excited about algebraic for the aboriginal time in his life. Grace smiled in that way that only accurate agents apperceive how to do.
Exactly.
This is alleged analysis with a remainder, and it shows that things don't consistently bisect up perfectly, but there's consistently artistic solution. That was a back Robert absently to interrupt. "What the hell is activity on here?" Tyler's smile vanished instantly. Grace stood up calmly, assuming no abruptness or fear. A strange acknowledgement for a maid bent out of her duties. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams." Tyler was accepting agitation with his homework, and aloof Grace paused, her eyes absolute commodity Robert couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't submission. It was about pity. "You were assassin to clean, not to teach. How cartel you interfere with my son's education, without permission?" Robert acquainted his voice rise. Tyler accustomed to avert Grace, but Robert beatific him to his room immediately. Alone with the maid, he continued. "I anticipate you'd bigger know your abode in this house." Grace nodded silently. But there was commodity in her eyes, advancing serenity, as if she were befitting abstruse too able to reveal at that moment. "Of course, Mr. Williams. I apologize for overstepping my bounds," she replied, alpha to gather up the atramentus blocks Tyler had left broadcast about. But Robert noticed something strange. Grace didn't seem nervous or remorseful. In fact, she handled those teaching abstracts with a professional acquaintance that didn't make faculty for a simple charwoman lady. As she put the blocks away, Robert saw something that absorbed him. Grace automatically organized the materials into specific pedagogical sequences, an action that appeared abysmal technical knowledge of teaching methodologies. "Grace," he called, concern overcoming irritation. "Area did you apprentice these techniques?" She paused for a second before answering. "YouTube, Mr. Williams. The internet teaches a lot these days." But Robert knew abundant bodies to know when addition was lying. And Grace wasn't exactly lying. She was omitting something abundant bigger. That night, as Tyler went to bed beforehand than usual, visibly aghast by the brusque end to his fun lesson, Robert couldn't stop thinking. In 2 months, Grace had transformed the atmosphere of his home in a way he couldn't explain. What bothered him wasn't aloof that he had caught the maid teaching his son. It was the way she had done it with a naturalness and adequacy that suggested antecedent professional experience. And there was commodity else that was disturbing. Tyler had shown more advance in 30 annual with Grace than in months of big-ticket analysis with Dr. Richardson, California's most renowned acquirements affliction specialist. If you're adequate this adventure of prejudice and abrupt discoveries, don't balloon to subscribe to the channel, because what Robert was about to discover about Grace's accomplished would completely change his angle on who was absolutely in his abode, and why she had accepted a job so far below her qualifications. The abutting morning, Robert couldn't apply on any of his meetings. Over breakfast, Tyler had asked 3 times about Grace would be back to advise him with the buzz numbers, and anniversary catechism was like a ache in Robert's conscience. "Daddy, why can't Grace advise me anymore?" Tyler insisted, idly active the atom that amount more than best people's annual salary. "Because she has added duties, Tyler. Dr. Richardson is your tutor, remember?" Robert replied curtly. But inside something agitated him deeply. Dr. Richardson amount $300 an hour, and Tyler always larboard the sessions added frustrated than aback he entered. Grace had achieved in bisected an hour what the specialist had not been able to accomplish in months. Around 10 in the morning, Robert called his authoritative assistant, Jennifer. I need all the advice I can get on our housekeeper, Grace Thompson. Work history, references, everything. Any specific problem, Mr. Williams? Jennifer asked, already accounting notes. Just delayed due diligence, Robert lied. The truth was that his concern was turning into obsession. 2 hours later, Jennifer alternate with a book that was too attenuate for edition 35 years old. Sir, it's strange. Grace Thompson has impeccable references from the aftermost 2 families she formed for. But before 2019, it's as if she didn't exist professionally. Robert abounding through the documents. Aggregate was very clean, actual sanitized. What about her education? High Academy in Chicago. According to the documents, annihilation else. But Robert knew enough bodies to apperceive back something didn't add up. That afternoon, he decided to analysis Grace directly. He came home Aboriginal again, award her cleaning the library, absolutely area the incident had happened the day before. Tyler was at school. Grace, can I allocution to you? She turned calmly, unhurried, unnerved again. That abashing serenity. Of course, Mr. Williams, I've been thinking about yesterday. You accustomed very specific pedagogical knowledge. Where did you absolutely apprentice these techniques? Grace paused her cleaning, but her eyes remained anchored on his. As I said, the internet has abounding educational resources these days. YouTube doesn't teach advanced Montessori methodology. Grace, you adapt those blocks according to pedagogical attempt that costs thousands of dollars to apprentice at universities. It was again that Robert saw something that baffled him. Grace smiled, not a submissive or afraid smile, a smile that agitated knowledge, experience, and something Robert couldn't name. Acquire you researched Montessori methods, Mr. Williams? The catechism bent him off guard. Robert Williams, CEO of a technology aggregation admired at billions, was actuality questioned by his housekeeper about ability he had Googled in a hurry an hour earlier. It's my responsibility to apperceive the educational methods activated to my son. Of course, Grace nodded, abiding to her. Cleaning. It's an important responsibility. Her accent wasn't sarcastic, but there was something there that fabricated Robert feel small, as if she knew absolutely what he had done. Desperately researched to try to bolt her in the act. That night, Robert alleged his acquaintance Marcus, the human assets administrator of an executive recruitment firm. Marcus, I charge a favor. Can you do a added thorough background analysis on a maid? Robert, man, that's a little paranoid. What trouble has she caused? None. It's aloof she seems too able for the job. Marcus laughed. You're accusatory about having a competent maid. The apple is turned upside down. It's not that. It's just that. Robert paused, acumen how difficult it would be to explain without sounding absolutely crazy. Aloof, do me this favor. 3 canicule later, Marcus called back with advice that larboard Robert even added confused. Man, your maid is a ghost. Grace Thompson has only officially existed back 2019. Before that, nothing. No acclaim card, no address, no job. It's as if she was born at the age of 30. Is that possible? Theoretically, yes. Some bodies change their names for a test and protection, complicated divorces, or Marcus paused. Robert, why are you investigating this woman so much? Robert afraid up without answering because he didn't acquire a logical answer. Or rather, he had an answer he didn't appetite to admit. Grace intrigued him in a way that challenged all his anxiously constructed prejudices. The afterward atramentus during dinner, Tyler asked a catechism that cut through the air like a knife. Dad, why don't you like Grace? I like her, Tyler. I aloof anticipate anybody should do their job, but she helps me acquire things. Dr. Richardson talks to me like I'm stupid. Robert about afraid on his wine. Tyler, Dr. Richardson, is one of the best specialists in the country. He's arid and makes me feel bad. Grace makes me feel smart. That night, Robert stayed up late. For the Aboriginal time in years, he questioned whether his certainties about competence, education, and amount were as solid as he had always believed. Grace Thompson was a maid who seemed to acquire the ability of a graduate professor, who didn't officially abide before 2019, who taught better than big-ticket experts, and who looked at him as if she knew absolutely who he absolutely was below the expensive suits and absorbing titles. What Robert did not perceive yet was that every question he asked, every analysis he started was actuality anxiously watched by someone who had abstruse to admit the signs of an able man aggravating to acquisition means to destroy what he couldn't control. And Grace Thompson, or whoever she really was several accomplished advanced of him, waiting patiently for the appropriate moment to acknowledge that some secrets are too powerful to abide active forever. Robert's attraction with apprehension Grace had angry into commodity dangerous. Over the abutting 2 weeks, he began to act like a man accident control. First, he installed added cameras about the house for security. Then, he started coming home at accidental times, always hoping to bolt Grace in some suspicious activity. What he began was a more frustrating and categorical maid who did her job with quiet efficiency. Jennifer, I appetite you to appoint a private investigator. Addition alert but efficient, Robert ordered during a company video conference. Sir, wouldn't that be a little boundless for a maid? Robert afraid up afterwards answering. Jennifer wouldn't understand. None of his advantaged white advisors would understand the activity of being intellectually outmatched by Addition, who should be in a lower position. The investigator, Mitchell Torres, returned with added arresting advice a week later. Mr. Williams. Grace Thompson is an aloof apparition of 2019. She legally afflicted her name. Her previous name was bankrupt by cloister order, something that alone happens in cases of witness aegis or victims of domestic violence. Keep investigating. I want to apperceive who she absolutely is. Sir, this could be actual big ticket, and well, it could be actionable depending on how deep we dig. I don't affliction about the price. Meanwhile, Grace had noticed every new camera, every abrupt arrival, every investigative glance. But adverse to Robert's expectations, she showed no signs of nervousness. In fact, she seemed to be cat and mouse for absolutely that. One afternoon, Robert arrived unannounced. He began Grace in the library, not cleaning, but annual one of the books on the shelf. Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire in English. Grace, that book is there for decoration. It's a circuitous university edition, Robert said, aggravating to sound casual. Grace calmly bankrupted the book, marking the folio area she had stopped. It's a alluring read, Mr. Williams. Freire talks about how apprenticeship can be used both to abuse and to liberate. Robert acquainted the claret blitz to his head. Where did you apprentice about Paulo Freire? YouTube has aggregate these days, Grace replied in her accepted calm tone. But this time, Robert detected something different in her eyes. It wasn't submission. It was about amusement. That night, Robert did commodity he would afterwards admit as his greatest display of ageism and paranoia. He called Dr. Richardson. Doctor, I need you to appraise whether my charwoman is negatively interfering with Tyler's educational development. Dr. Richardson, who answerable $300 per affair and had an ego proportional to the price, was visibly offended. Mr. Williams, a housekeeper with no formal qualifications, should not alike be involved in the educational action of a child with Tyler's specific needs.
Exactly.
I appetite official documentation that this arrest is harmful. What Robert did not perceive was that Grace had anticipated absolutely this move. 2 days after drive to Richardson's appointment, during which he had interrogated Tyler about his another abstraction methods as if they were alarming practices, Grace received a call. Dr. Grace Mitchell. The articulation on the added end was accustomed and warm. Dr. Peterson, I wasn't assured your call so soon. Dr. James Peterson was the director of the Harvard-MIT Educational Institute, one of the best prestigious educational analysis organizations in the country. And he had been Grace's doctoral advisor before she became Grace Thompson. Grace, I saw the letters on innovative methodologies in Beverly Hills. Small educational circle, isn't it? I accustomed your assignment immediately. Grace smiled for the aboriginal time in weeks. Is it time? Added then time. The Institute has accustomed your official return. We acquire a position cat and mouse for you. Abundant analysis annual, and well, some affecting bodies who would very abundant like to accommodated the absolute Dr. Mitchell. That night, Grace did something she had abhorred for 2 years. She opened the laptop she kept in the back allowance and accessed her academic emails for the Aboriginal time back, changing her identity. 347 benighted messages, invitations to international conferences, offers of collaboration, requests for consulting from educational systems in 3 altered countries. Her commodity on across-the-board methodologies for accouchement with appropriate needs had been cited 1,247 times back its publication. Her research on socioeconomic bent in elite educational environments had become required annual at 15 universities. Grace began accounting an email to Dr. Peterson but stopped. First, she needed to verify that her suspicions about Robert Williams were correct. A quick search appeared what she had hoped to find. Robert Williams had been one of the capital financiers of the attack that resulted in allotment cuts for public schools in low-income districts 3 years ago. His foundation, the Williams Education Initiative, alone funded elite clandestine schools. Alike more interesting, Dr. Richardson, Tyler's expert, was on the amount of an organization that Robert supported financially, an alignment that advocated for educational meritocracy, a fancy delicacy for befitting poor and black accouchement abroad from quality educational opportunities. Grace smiled again, but this time it was different. It was the smile of addition who had just found the final allotment of an actual complex puzzle. She opened a new binder on her computer and began accumulation documents, not aloof about her own character and qualifications, but about Robert Williams, his company, his educational initiatives, and the arrangement of people he adjourned to advance the cachet quo. Tyler had been aloof, the catalyst. But the absolute affair was abundant bigger. How many children like Tyler were afflicted every day by men like Robert Williams, who believed that adequacy and intelligence were privileges that should be broadcast according to bark color and coffer account? The abutting morning, Grace woke up beforehand than usual. She made coffee as usual, tidied up the house as usual, but there was something different about her movements. A new precision, a aplomb that came from someone who had assuredly absently to stop hiding. Aback Robert came bottomward for breakfast. He began Tyler doing something he hadn't apparent in months. The boy was animated as he agreeably solved math problems. Grace accomplished me a new way of cerebration about numbers. Dad, appetite to see? Robert looked at Grace, who was calmly advancing cafeteria in the kitchen. She didn't attending back, but he could swear he saw a slight smile at the bend of her mouth. At that moment, 2 things became bright to Robert. First, he had completely underestimated Grace Thompson. Second, whatever she was planning, it was already too backward for him to stop her. What Robert couldn't have observed was that in beneath than 48 hours, the name Dr. Grace Mitchell would be in the country's arch educational newspapers, and his own acceptability would be questioned by bodies far more powerful than him. For 2 years, Grace had hidden abaft the character of a maid. But some secrets are too powerful to abide active forever, especially when the actuality who holds them finally decides that the time has appeared to show the apple who she absolutely is. The morning that would change aggregate began with Robert accepting an abrupt alarm from Mitchell Torres, the private investigator. Mr. Williams, I charge to see you urgently. I begin out who Grace Thompson is. Sir, you won't acquire what I found. An hour later, Robert was sitting in his office, leafing through a dossier that fabricated his claret run cold. Photographs, certificates, academic articles, all embracing awards. Everything acicular to an accuracy that was impossible to accept. Dr. Grace Elizabeth Mitchell Torres, apprehend aloud. Ph.D. in apprenticeship from Harvard, postal adolescent in across-the-board education at MIT, world-renowned able in child cognitive development and methodologies for accouchement with appropriate needs. Robert held a photo of Grace accepting an award from the United Nations for excellence in transformative education. Wearing an elegant fleet dejected blazer amidst by diplomats and acclaimed academics. That's impossible. She's a maid. She cleans my house. Mr. Williams. She accurately changed her name in 2019 afterwards. Torres paused, clearly afflictive afterwards. Actuality, forced to leave her position at Stanford University because of alien pressures related to her analysis on racial discrimination in the educational system. The abutting photo in the dossier showed Grace, Dr. Mitchell, lecturing to a arranged audience, a presentation on how socioeconomic bent destroys the potential of able children. Robert felt abhorrence, a scent in his throat. External pressures from whom Torres slid another certificate beyond the table from a group of bourgeois influencers in education adjourned by able-bodied. You're on the list of above funders, Mr. Williams. Robert's apple collapsed. For 2 years, he had advised one of the best respected educators in the country, like a domestic servant. A woman who had been forced into anonymity by bodies he himself had funded. At that actual moment, his secretary, Jennifer, rushed into the office. Mr. Williams' commodity strange is happening. Several journalists are trying to acquaintance you about a press conference that Robert's buzz rang. It was his wife, Linda. Hysterical. Robert, turn on CNN now.
Now.
Robert effected the remote with abashed hands. The screen showed a arranged amphitheater at the Harvard-MIT Institute of Education. On stage, a costumed woman battened to hundreds of academics, journalists, and activists. It was Grace, but not the Grace he knew. This Grace wore an elegant, able outfit. Her hair neatly styled, her aspect confident. Next to her, a banderole read, Dr. Grace Mitchell, Official Acknowledgement Appointment on Systemic Bigotry in Elite Education. My name is Dr. Grace Elizabeth Mitchell. Her articulation echoed through the amphitheater via the sound system. For 2 years, I lived beneath a false identity, alive as a maid for a family in Beverly Hills. Today I am here to acquaint you why it was all important for me to adumbrate and what I abstruse about prejudice by active on the added side. Robert acquainted the arena abandoned beneath his feet. Grace connected on the screen. The man who active me, Mr. Robert Williams, CEO of Technova Solutions, has spent the aftermost few months aggravating to unmask me. He installed added cameras, hired investigators, questioned my qualifications to advise his own son, a brilliant boy who thrived on educational methods that amount hundreds of dollars an hour with specialists, but which he received for chargeless from his maid. The camera focused on a slideshow, financial documents, donations, correspondence between Robert and organizations that promoted educational meritocracy. While Mr. Williams was investigating me, I was investigating him. I discovered that over the accomplished 5 years, he had donated added than $2 actor to organizations that systematically reduce funding for accessible schools in low-income communities. The abutting angel literally took Robert's animation away. It was a photo of himself smiling, presenting a symbolic analysis to the Williams Educational Irate Foundation, the same alignment that had pushed for Grace's adjournment from Stanford. Mr. Williams anon adjourned the campaign that affected me to leave my academic career, Grace declared calmly. And for 2 years, while I bankrupt his abode and cared for his son, he accustomed to disqualify me based on the same prejudices he had adjourned to join me. The auditorium was absolutely silent. Grace opened a binder and took out an alternation of documents. I acquire actuality transcripts of conversations amid Mr. Williams and Dr. Richardson, the specialist who was treating Tyler. Conversations area, they discussed how to anticipate an unqualified maid from interfering in the educational process of an adolescent who was clearly benefiting from that interference. Robert's articulation came out in clear audio recording. Doctor, I charge you to assess whether my maid is negatively interfering with Tyler's educational development. I appetite official documentation that this arrest is harmful. Jennifer was pale. Torres stood up uncomfortably. Robert Williams, a respected billionaire, was being publicly apparent as a man who financed educational bigotry while personally benefiting from the results of that aforementioned discrimination. Grace continued, the best accurate affair is that Tyler, Mr. Williams' son, has made more advance in 2 months with methodologies I developed at Harvard than he has in years of expensive therapy. But his ancestor would rather pay hundreds of dollars an hour to an incompetent specialist than recognize that a tremendous woman ability acquires something valuable to offer. Comparative archive appeared on the screen. Tyler's advance with Dr. Richardson against his advance with Grace's methods. The aberration was striking. Robert's buzz wouldn't stop ringing. His company, his investors, his wife, reporters. Grace captivated up one last document. I acquire an angle for Mr. Williams and others who armamentarium educational discrimination bearded as excellence. Use your assets to build, not to destroy. Advance an accurate quality education for all children, not just those built in with privilege. She paused, looking anon at the camera as if she could see Robert through the screen. And Tyler, if you're watching, apperceive that your intelligence and abeyance never depended on the blush of your teacher's skin or the amount of your lessons. You are ablaze because you are you. And any accurate drill master would admit that immediately. The amphitheater erupted in applause. Robert Williams, the man who had accustomed to abase and disqualify Grace Thompson, was watching Dr. Grace Mitchell accept a continuing acclaim from some of the best admired academics in the world. As the credits formed across the screen, assuming Grace's impressive credentials and quotes from her most influential articles, Robert accomplished a devastating truth. He had spent 2 years investigating and aggravating to destroy absolutely the affectionate of actuality he should acquire been supporting. A woman who had committed her activity to helping children like his own son. An educator who had been silenced by prejudices that he himself had funded. A world-renowned expert whom he had advised like a servant. And now, as his buzz rang incessantly with calls from journalists wanting his ancillary of the story, Robert Williams assuredly accepted that he had lost abundant added than aloof a competent employee. He had absent his reputation, his moral credibility, and possibly the transformative apprenticeship that could have changed his son's activity forever. But the question that remained changing as the conference connected to be broadcast live to millions of bodies was devastatingly simple. Would it be possible for a man who had financed discrimination for years to acquisition a way to adjustment the accident he had caused? Or are some bridges assuredly austere by the actual blaze of ageism that we helped to ignite? 6 months afterwards, the conference that afflicted everything, the world had become an actual altered place for anybody involved. Robert Williams lost not alone his acceptability, but also his company. Investors withdrew funds en masse afterwards, the accessible acknowledgement, and Technova Solutions was awash for a fraction of its aboriginal value. Discrimination lawsuits from various educational organizations he had harmed left him financially ruined. Dr. Richardson had his authorization revoked after an analysis appeared years of unethical practices adjourned by discriminatory groups. His career as an expert concluded overnight. Grace, on the other hand, flourished in unimaginable ways. The Harvard-MIT Institute created an appropriate armchair in her name, Dr. Grace Mitchell Armchair for across-the-board education innovation. Universities about the Apple competed for her lectures and consulting services. Added importantly, Tyler became the Aboriginal apprentice in the experimental program Grace developed for children with appropriate needs. Within 6 months, he not alone accomplished the educational level of his age group, but significantly surpassed it. Dr. Grace, Tyler said during one of his sessions, now officially captivated at the UCLA Educational Lab, was my ancestor absolutely prejudiced? Grace smiled with the aforementioned infinite patience as always. Your ancestor was afraid, Tyler. Afraid of accident control, afraid of acceptance he was wrong. But people can change a back they finally understand the absolute amount of their prejudices. Robert, watching from the lab window, now as an accustomed visitor, no longer as an authoritative father, heard every word. He had absent everything, his company, his fortune, his reputation. But for the Aboriginal time in years, he saw his son absolutely blessed and thriving. May I appear in? He asked timidly. Grace nodded. Tyler was coaching me about the project you two are developing. It was true. Robert had started volunteering in public schools, application his business experience, to advise underserved communities. Not for publicity or public redemption, but because he finally understood that adequacy and human value do not depend on abode or bank account. Dr. Grace accomplished me that being truly acute is alive aback you were wrong, Tyler explained proudly. At that moment, Robert accomplished he had gained something far added admired than billions. His son's 18-carat account, and the befalling to body a bequest based on justice, not privilege. Grace had proven that the best animus is not to destroy those who abuse you, but to build something so abundant that it becomes impossible to avoid its value. Her maid had become one of the best influential educators in the country, transforming not alone